Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to build on the how to play videos for Plum Island Horror that we've already created and actually play through some of the game so you can see how all of it works in practice. For this purpose, I'm going to play solo, but I'm going to play the 4-player solo variant, which means that I'm going to be playing as 4 different factions, but I'll be playing each of them myself in turn. So we're going to start by going through the setup process, and quite a lot of the setup is automated by the tabletop simulator module here that I'm using to show you how to play the game. For example, the game board is already in place, but I do have to perform step number 2, which is choose the factions I'm going to play. And for purposes of this game, I'm going to play the PIRLSS Security Services. So in the tabletop simulator module, if you're playing a faction, you just come over here and click on this play faction button. And what it does is it'll move units that belong in a specific area or start in a specific area to that place, although most of the standees will have to be placed by you manually. We'll also play the Greenport Township faction. Let's not play the Neighborhood Watch, so I'll discard that faction. I'll discard the Islanders Athletic Club, and I'll also play the National Guard and the Plum Island Constabulary. So the next thing that I have to do is I have to actually place my faction standees on the board. So let's talk a little bit about how I'm going to think through this. The first consideration is I want to establish power to the island-wide light and power space by removing all the damage from it as soon as I can in the game, because doing so gives me 5 supplies, and supplies are a really crucial resource. So one of the characters from the Greenport Township, Ralph Norton, has this great special ability which makes him really good at repairing things. So I want to try to use him to repair that space. Unfortunately, he starts in the town dump, but Ed Cramden can start anywhere, and he has a special ability that he has 6 vehicular movement, and he can carry units with him. So what I'm going to do is put them together and then allow them and then use Ed Cramden as early as I can to ferry Ralph Norton to that island-wide light and power space. So the last 2 units we have to place, I'm going to place both of them in the same place. So I'm going to grab both of them, and we're going to place them over here. And what I'm going to do with them is I'm going to kind of use these guys to defend sort of on the left side of the board. So we'll place them both here in the fire station so that they're reasonably far up the board where they can start to encounter horrors as they come. And like I said, the purple faction is going to sort of focus on defending the left side of the board. Next up is the PIRLSS Security Services. I'm also going to keep them primarily on the left side of the board. And one of their really key characters is this Kevin Blark character. What's really amazing about him is first of all, he can move after a ranged combat ability using his segue, but after close combat, you don't place biohazard cubes in the biohazard bag. So using him for close combat is really, really amazing. It's a really key part of the game. So I'm going to put him kind of as my frontline defense up here in the Oceanside Industrial Park. And I will also place Dr. McCoy with him, again, just to kind of double up there and have a couple of units in that space. And then for the other 2, they can either be in, they can both go in 2D, or they could go in 6D, but that puts them on the other side of the board. So we're going to bring them over to track 2 and put them in Pearl West. So I've got most of these units gathered together. Their leader is down here in HQ, but we can move her up there to get with them and get her leadership ability working with that faction. Now, the National Guard is a special case. None of these units start on the map. Each of them enters during a crisis adrenaline move, so I don't have to place anybody there. So that leaves the Plum Island Constabulary, and we're going to use them on the right side of the board. We're going to tend to use the National Guard over there as well, but we're going to use them on the right side of the board. Now, really key, there's a couple of really key abilities here. Officer Friday has the ability to either move civilian units to areas or to move with the civilian units when he goes. So he's really good at shuttling civilians around. So one of the places that I want to put him, so he can go in 6I or 6E. Oops. And one of the things I really like to do with him is I like to use him over here with the Great South Bay Bridge, because he can stand here, and using his ability, he can move civilian units 1, 2 spaces, and without actually leaving the bridge tolls area where he can defend the Great South Bay Bridge, he can evacuate civilians off the Great South Bay Bridge. So we're going to place him in the airport with the National Guard unit. Commander Stallion can go in the Clementine State Penitentiary. So we're going to do that with him. It puts him a little far up the board, and so he can sometimes end up getting in a little bit of early combat, but it's usually not so bad. And then these 2 units both can go in 6I, which is the 2nd Precinct, which again gets them on the same side of the board as their other units, and not too far from the action. So with that, we have placed all of our faction units on the board. Now we move to the next, the NPC units. They're already on the board in the setup, so you don't have to do that. Next up, I add civilian units to the board, and the Tabletop Simulator module has a button that when you click it, it'll do that for you. What you're doing is you're placing a number of civilians on the board according to the number of dots that are in the area. So in this case, you'd place 1 civilian there. In this case, you would place 2 civilians there. But in the Tabletop Simulator module, you can just press this button and it'll automatically put all of the civilians on the board. You can see we've got 1 there. We've got 2 of them there. And then the remaining ones are in this little area here. Sometimes you add them to the board based on a search or events. Then I place the turn order tokens in the draw bag. So because this is the 4-player game, each of the factions that I selected is here. I don't need the wild turn token, so we can just delete that. Don't need that in the 4-player game. And the turn order bag already has the fate tokens and the impending doom tokens in it. So I will simply place those 4 tokens in the turn order bag. Now there's 8 tokens in there, and it is ready to go. Next up, placing biohazard cubes in the bag. The game already starts with the 5 green biohazard cubes in the bag and the 14 red and yellow cubes ready to go. Now I'm going to shuffle the decks. So this button here will shuffle all of the decks. Slightly out of order on this little sheet, but you get the idea. And then I'm going to spawn Murder of Horrors units, so I can click this button and it will automatically spawn. You can see up here it automatically spawns 4 Murder of Horrors tiles into each spawn zone, ready to go. Next up, you place the mutations, but they are already placed. The markers are already on the board. I have a supply of hit cubes inside of here, so you can draw as many of these as you need. So they are already ready to go as well. And now I have to check for storm damage. The way that you check for storm damage basically seeds the board with some damage to bridges. There's also some areas like we showed you, the island-wide power and light has damage. Some of the docks have damage. This just adds a little bit of variable damage to the game every time you play it. So in order to do this, I draw a fate number. So in this case, I've drawn a 6. And then I look at this table over here and I've got widespread damage. Thank goodness. So I place 2 damage markers on each even number bridge and the Great South Bay Bridge area. So let me grab a damaged marker here. We've got, flip that over to its 2 side. So we place 2 more in the Great South Bay Bridge area. And then we go to each even numbered bridge in the game. So here we've got bridge number 2. That takes a damage marker. And remember, when you're looking for bridges, some of them go left to right, some of them go up and down. Here is another bridge over here by this beach. That is bridge number 4. We've got bridge number 6, which connects the two halves of the board, and that's something we're going to want to deal with because that can be a real problem. And then finally, I need to find bridge number 8, which is unfortunately the bridge leading away from the island-wide light and power station, which is going to make it a little bit harder for Ralph Norton and Ed Cramden to get there, but we'll have to deal with that bridge damage as well. So now we have placed storm damage on the board. Now we do the first contact procedure, and essentially the horrors get an activation and move until they make contact with either a player faction unit or a civilian unit, and it just represents sort of what happens, which leads up to the island becoming aware that there is a problem going on. So we go and we draw a fate card, and in this case we only pay attention to the activate section. So in this case I drew activate tracks 4 and 5. So I'm going to go up here to track 4, and I am going to this Murder of Horrors. Now, one nice feature in this module is if you select a stack and you press the 1 key on your numpad, you can look over in the chat, and it'll tell you how many objects are in that stack. So this stack has 4, which means that it has a movement allowance of 2. So I'm going to move it 1, 2, and it has now made contact with Moe's Game Store, which has set up for a gaming night apparently at the Schnitzel Brewery. Now, because I drew a second track, I need to activate track 5 as well. This also has 4 units in it, we know. It moves 2 forward to the Pine Barrens. Then to end the first contact process, we perform combat. So the Murder of Horrors stack here is going to attack Moe's Game Store. So they have a hit potential of 1. There's 1 civilian in the game, so they automatically just eliminate that civilian. Now don't forget, by eliminating that civilian, we add a tile to that stack, so that's now a 5-unit stack, and we add a biohazard cube to the biohazard bag. So we had a yellow biohazard cube. And because we ended up encountering a unit and holding combat, the first contact phase is now done. So I'm just gonna press this button and it'll switch over to the quick reference card. And now we are ready to play the game. All right, so we start by drawing from the turn order bag, and we drew the Greenport Township. That's actually really good because, as you know, one of our key first objectives is to move those units, those units to repair positions, so we can get them there nice and early, which is great. But before we do that, we can do crisis adrenaline moves with any of our units. So let's take a quick look at where we are. So in order to get from this town dump space to the beach, these units are going to need to move 1 area, 2 areas, 3 areas, 4 areas, 5 areas, 6 areas. They need to move 6 areas. Now, Ed Cramden's vehicular movement allowance is 6, so we're good there. So we don't need to move them at all. What I am going to do, however, is I am going to what I meant to say though is if they had been, say, 7 spaces away from there, then we could have moved both units, for example, to here, which would have allowed us to get there in 1 move. But since they can already make it, we don't need to do that. But we are going to take Andrew Mayberry, the mayor, and we are going to move him because we want to connect him up if we can with the units up there. So what we're going to do is we're going to move him 1 area to the docks, and then 1 area to the Coast Guard station docks. So now he's on the other side of the board, and he can join his Doug House and Bill LaFlame over here. These units can now also perform a crisis adrenaline move, and you can see that the brown pretty much has this well covered. So we're going to actually move our purple units both of them are going to move 1. Doug House's foot movement is only 1, so that's as far as he can go. And actually, Bill the Flame, we're going to move him up here. He has a nice special ability which forces stacks back, so we're going to get him a little bit up in front so that he can be our first line of defense over here. But we're kind of getting them lined up over here to defend this 1 track. So having done our Crisis Adrenaline move, we now move on to the activation. And it being the morning of round 1, we only have 1 activation. So we're only allowed 1 activation. And we're going to use that to activate Ed Cramden for movement. He's going to take a move action, but he's going to use his vehicular movement. So that means that I have to spend 1 supply. You have to spend a supply when you do a vehicular movement. And he's going to use his special ability, which is going to allow him to pick up and drop off units and carry them with him. So he is going to take himself and the Ralph Norton character and move 1 space, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 4 spaces, 5 spaces, 6 spaces, and so they end up here. And so on a subsequent turn, Ralph Norton can work on repairing this bridge. And then Ed Cramden can go off and do what he needs to do. So that ends the activation for the Greenport Township. Now other factions are able to do follow actions, and so we're going to go clockwise. So the PIRLSS Security Services gets to choose first if they want to do a follow action. So with the PIRLSS Security Services, what I want to do is I want to activate their leader unit, and I want to get her over to be adjacent to the rest of their units. Now, I can't really go up here. To go up the board, kind of in this direction, the first bridge which crosses over to this side of the board is way up here in the 2nd row. And I don't really want to go that direction, so I'm going to go sort of following the kind of path that the mayor took. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate Martha Winfrey for vehicular movement. So again, I have to pay 1 supply in order to do that. And I'm going to move her 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now remember, you can never end a turn with more than 2 standees in a space, but you can pass through as long as you don't end there. So she passes through and ends up here, and again, similar to the mayor, she's now on the same side of the board as her units, so she's well positioned. Having taken a follow action with her, I now have to draw a fate card and no event card. So not only do I not draw an event card, but I also get to decide if the Plum Island Constabulary wants to take a turn. So if we come over here and look at the Plum Island Constabulary, on their side of the board, we have a bit of an issue brewing here, which is if track 5 activates, it's going to come in and it's going to destroy this civilians unit. So Commander Stallion has this ability, Shoot and Scoot. When conducting a ranged combat action, he can also move 1 area for free, before or after. So I think what I'm going to do with him is I'm going to move him 1 area to John's Hunting Lodge, and then I'm going to perform ranged combat against this Murder of Horrors stack. Now unfortunately they're in a forest, so shields are not going to count as hits for me, but again I pay 1 supply and then I roll 3 dice. Make sure, yeah, his ranged combat ability is 3, so I grab 3 of these dice and I roll them, and I get 2 shields, which unfortunately, because they are in a forest, means I get no results. So not an auspicious start there. And let's see if we just add insult to injury. We don't. No event card. So we not only do not draw an event card, but we can move on to the National Guard. Now the National Guard only has 2 units in the game. But this being a follow action, one of the actions you can take when you can only take it as a follow action is reposition. So what we're going to do for them is we're going to reposition the Army Hog helicopter in this 4C space. So here he's going to be able to target these Murder of Horror stacks that are moving down the board in order to attack them with gunship combat potentially if they move. So as always, we draw a fate card, and lucky beginning in that sense, no event card. So that is all of my non-active factions have now taken a follow action, which means that we are now done with the Greenport Township token. And so we move on to draw the next turn order token. All right. So we draw the next turn order token, and it is the Impending Doom token. So we draw an event card. It says Brutal Brawl at the Docks. If there are any civilian units in the Greenport Docks area, half of them rounded up are eliminated. Players choose which units are removed. So we have to go to the Greenport Docks. 3K, that's here, and there is one unit rounded up. So unfortunately, the 3-point Walker family, this is really unfortunate, is eliminated from the game. And when I eliminate civilian units in this tabletop module, I tend to like to throw them up here, and the reason being that sometimes you need to check if something's on the board. And one of the easier ways I find to do that is often to look at what's not on the board and what's in the drawback. So that is that. Next up is the National Guard. So the National Guard starts with a Crisis Adrenaline move, at which point we could bring one of these units onto the map. I think for now I'm not going to do that. The reason I'm not going to do that is I want to kind of conserve supplies, because I would like to use this Army Hog for some gunship combat. So with our activation, we are going to activate the Army Hog, and flip that over at some point. Sorry about that. We're going to activate it for to do gunship combat, so range combat, gunship combat. So I go to my National Guard area. Oops, I'm missing a supply there. So normally factions start with 2 supplies. So in this case, I'm just placing a 1 supply marker there because they would have to flip it to pay for supplies for this gunship combat. And he has a 3 for gunship combat, so we come back down here. We're going to hope for slightly better results this turn. So we got a hit, a partial hit, and a shield. Now again, the target is in an urban area, so the shield counts for nothing, but we do have to do 1 hit. So we remove 1 tile from that stack, and we're going to place it back into the spawn bag. And that is the end of the activation for the National Guard. So now we go on to potential follow actions. So next in clockwise order is the Greenport Township. So really critically, they are interested in repair, as you recall. So I'm going to activate my Ralph Norton unit, and he's going to attempt to repair this bridge so that he can get into the island-wide light and power station. So if you remember, his special ability is he draws 2 fate cards. I'm going to draw 1, 2. So the first one that he draws, the fate number is a 1. He draws 2 of them, and then he applies both of these results as his repair. So his first draw for repair is a 1, which is an epic fail. But part of his special ability is that always treat a draw of 1 as no effect. So we essentially treat that as no effect. His second fate card draw was a 6, and that is working overtime, and so you basically remove all of the damage markers. So this is why I try to use him over here. He comes over here and removes all of the damage from that bridge, which is excellent. Next up is the PIRLSS Security Services. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to perform a search action. Now, would probably like to perform this search action using Kevin Blart because he has good admin and bravery ratings, and sometimes those matter. But unfortunately, the area is compromised, so I can't use the location action there. So instead, I'm going to use a location action down here in Pearl West, and I'll use Dr. Venkman for this. So I go down to the search deck and I draw a search card, and I get isolated glamping facility discovered. So I get 4 supplies and a random civilians unit, and I exhaust the area. So I draw a random civilians unit. I get car care auto body. That's worth 1. I'm going to need an exhausted locations marker, and I get, which is great, I get 4 supplies. So we take all of these and we move them over here. So we place this civilians unit in this space. We place the exhausted marker in this space. And so when supplies are drawn for a search card, you can immediately take them onto your faction mat. Normally, you have to perform a move action to pick up loose supplies in a space. Even if you don't move anywhere, you just have to perform a move action. But because the supplies came in from a search card, when it happens, I can take them onto my mat. So we are going to add these 4 supplies to the PIRLSS security services. So the good news is they're now well set up for the hunger phase in a little while. So we are now done with that follow action. So we draw a fate card, and our luck holds. No event card. So now, do we want to press our luck with the Plum Island Constabulary? I think I'd like to do a search. There is no search icon in this space, so he can't search there. But I'm going to do a move action to move him to the fire station, which does have a binoculars. So on subsequent turns, he can do a search here, and he has a good chance of getting something useful. I draw a fate card, and our luck finally runs out, so we now draw an event card. Infected plane crash. We spawn a Murder of Horrors unit directly into the Old Republic area. We grab one from our draw pile and we place it directly in the Old Republic airport. It's pretty crowded in here, but trust me, that is the Old Republic airport. So now we are going to have close combat because a Murder of Horrors unit spawned into a space with player characters or player units. So I have 1 horrors unit, and I have 2 player standees and a civilian unit. So I basically decide which of my standees is going to defend. So I'm going to choose Officer Friday here because he has a close combat rating of 3. The Murder of Horrors unit, it's 1 unit, it's in an urban area, so it's 1 divided by 4, but it's always rounded up, so that means that they have a hit potential of 1. Joseph Friday rolls 3 dice, oh my lord, and gets absolutely nothing. So, a couple of things happen here. That is not good. So, Officer Friday takes a hit, so he now has 1 hit, and on his toughness of 5, and because it was close combat, we add a yellow cube to the biohazard bag, which now has 2 yellow cubes in it. And so we draw again, and the PIRLSS security services are now going. Now, right now I'm not super happy about this. I was kind of hoping to draw a fate token because the problem is that in the last 4 tokens, we're going to have 3 activations by the horrors and only 1 by me to respond to it. So that's frankly not ideal. So first of all, we have Crisis Adrenaline move. So we are going to move, she is going to move 1. I am going to move Kevin Blart forward. I'd like him to sort of protect this space, and because he doesn't, he doesn't place biohazard cubes when he's in close combat, I like to get him out in front to sort of soak up the horrors. And I can move him 2. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move him over into the Venner Bread area. I think I will move Dr. Venkman into the industrial park. So that is my crisis adrenaline moves with the PIRLSS Security Services. So now for my action, I'm going to do a crowd control action to try and get some of these civilians to safety. So we've got this Wiley Brothers Bar and Grill who's up here buying buns, I guess, at Venner Bread. And we've got Artie Wolf's Whiskey Emporium who are drinking at the industrial park, and Big Nate's Clothing Store, which I guess they have a warehouse there at the industrial park. So I think what I'd like to do is actually, Dr. Venkman has an admin rating of 2. And so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this opportunity to move these 2 civilians units 1 space and get them a little bit further away from the sort of top of the board where I'm expecting horrors to kind of pour through at any moment. So now we got to think about follow actions. The Plum Island Constabulary is first to take a follow action. And let's go ahead and with our follow action, let's do what we sent Detective Drebin here to do, which is to do a search action. I draw 1 card. I'm probably not going to use that. That doesn't look good at all. So, ambush. Your unit is taking a short rest in a local hotel and you find some valuable supplies. While looking for some rooms in which to take a snooze, one person opens the banquet hall doors. They are instantly trampled and torn apart by the attendees of the Plum Island LARPing Society dressed as vampires and ghouls. Oh, the irony. Immediately spawn 3 murders of horrors units into the area and also place 2 supplies. So really glad I used Detective Drebin for that, because that's not a particularly good search card. This one, on the other hand, is a gluten for punishment. You find some survivors who are cradling multiple loaves of Venner Bread's gluten-free oatmeal honey, sourdough, cinnamon, raisin, olive, rye bread. One of your personal favorites, although you run out of breath just trying to say it. They say that there are a dozen delivery trucks still in the loading bays. Place 6 supplies in the Venner Bread area, 1B, unless there's a horrors unit in that area. Then place only 3 supplies. Exhaust this area after resolving this card. Well, clearly this is the one that we're going to do. And then I have to exhaust the area. So we're going to discard this. And I know, because I was just up there, that there are no horrors in that Venner Bread space. So I am going to take 6 supplies and an exhausted location marker. And I'm going to go up and we are going to place all of that in this location. Sorry. So put the exhausted location marker there. And then I've got these supplies again are going to go onto the board for the PIRLSS Security Services. So they are just racking up supplies here. So that is our follow action for the PIRLSS Security Services, and we draw a card and there is no event card. So now the National Guard have to decide whether to take a follow action. And let's activate Private Mac Reacher and use him for ranged combat. So we are going to delete the last of the National Guard's supplies, and we have a range combat rating of 2. So we roll 2 dice, and again we're in an urban area. So we get, thank goodness, we get 1 hit. So that 1 hit eliminates this Murder of Horrors unit. Place it back in the bag, back in the draw pile. And because it's a range combat, it doesn't generate any biohazard infection. And now we draw a fate card and no event card. So the last group to go is the Greenport Township, and as much as it's pushing my luck, we are going to move Ralph Norton across that recently repaired bridge into the island-wide light and power station so that he can get to work repairing this. So he uses his foot movement to go there, and consistent anyway, we now draw an event card. The red sickness. Add 2 red cubes, if possible, to the biohazard bag. So this is going to create a little bit of a problem because this is going to cause the biohazard track to go up a little bit faster. So we may need to start thinking about doing some, I've got a character that can do some decontamination of this bag. Dr. Corey can draw a fate cube, and he can remove cubes from the biohazard bag. So we're probably going to use his ability for that to try to get those out of the bag. Of course, he can't actually make things worse. So again, because we drew an event card, and because that was the last non-active faction to go, we are done with our security services turn token. So as strange as this may sound to say, now I'm really hoping to start drawing some fate tokens and activating the horrors, because I really would like to have my last faction, which is the Plum Island Constabulary, have a turn to react to some of what goes on. And I do draw a fate token. So I draw a fate card, and my spawn is track 4. So I go up here, and I spawn onto track 4. So I now have, this spawned 3 horrors because of where I am on the biohazard track. So, and I activate track 3. So not really that terrible. So here, I know because this is what started the game here, I have a 4 horrors unit, so I'm going to move it 2 areas, and it ends here. So on its next turn, it's going to have to make a decision about which direction to go on the fork, and is threatening a pair of civilians units here, one of which is actually quite high value. So I may want to think about doing something about that, if I can. Draw another one, and I get another fate token. So this is what I probably wanted. We get reanimated, so that's not particularly great. And tracks 1, 2, and 3. So this is going to be a big turn for the horrors. So first things first, every stack gets 2 more horrors. So I'm going to pause for a second and do that, but I'm basically just going to drag 2 here, but you don't need to be subjected to watching that. Okay, so all of the stacks in the game now have 2 more Murder of Horrors tiles in them. So now we start moving them. So just to confirm, this has 6 objects, and that means that they can move 2 areas. So this is going to move 1, 2, and that's going to create a combat situation there. Just so I don't forget, let's grab one of these combat markers, and we'll stick that there so that we know that we have to perform combat here. This again is going to be 6 units, so it moves 1, 2, but luckily doesn't encounter anybody. Now track 3, this unit, which has 5 objects in it, so it has a movement allowance of 2, has to draw a fate card to determine which side of the fork it takes. So it takes direction 5. So that means it's going to go this direction. So because this bridge is damaged, we have a forced crossing. So we remove 1 Murder of Horrors tile and 1 damage. We remove a 2nd Murder of Horrors tile. That removes the last damage from that bridge. The remainder cross into this space and stop there. Even though they had 2 movement points available, they stop immediately after a forced crossing. So I got a little bit lucky there, but I really don't have many defenses here in the middle of the board, and that's probably going to become something that the National Guard is going to need to deal with. So having finished activating tracks 1, 2, and 3, we return here for the combat in this space. So just to remind myself, I have 6 Murder of Horrors in this stack. So that gives them in an urban area or a building area, it gives them a hit potential of 2. 6 divided by 4, rounding up. So Kevin Blart is going to be defending here. We've got 1 Murder of Horrors unit stack and 1 player unit. So he'll be defending with his close combat of 3. So they have a hit potential of 2. I am rolling 3 dice. So that's a really good result. So I got a critical hit and 2 shields. So their hit potential is now 0. And I'm going to roll this die for my critical hit. Oh, so close. So I got 1 hit. So Kevin Blart takes no damage. The stack loses 1 unit. We just put it back in the draw pile, taking them down to 5. And if you remember Kevin Blart's special ability, he has biohazard suit. So that close combat, unlike most other times in the game, or really every other time in the game, doesn't place a biohazard cube into the bag. So with that Murder of Horrors activation is done, and now it's going to be interesting to see. I'm not even sure which one I want to draw, but I got the Plum Island Constabulary, so the police get a turn now. Okay, so for their crisis adrenaline move, I'd like to get this leader unit moving up the board to get more together with his compatriots. So he has a foot movement speed of 2. So I am going to move him, I'm just going to move him 2 spaces up to there. Chase has, I would like to get these civilians here on the beach someplace where I could use them. So I'm going to have Chase the dog, who has a foot movement of 3. I'm going to have him go 1, 2, 3, and he will end up there. And what I think I'm going to do is try to move them up to the bridge tolls area and evacuate them over the Great South Bay Bridge. I'm going to leave Drebin where he is, because he can still search that area, and I'm going to leave Friday where he is. But what I am going to do is I am going to move Commander Stallion into this area with his foot movement. Now remember, players moving into an area with horrors units doesn't trigger combat, and the goal of what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually trigger a range combat with him. Is going to be my main action, which is going to allow me to attack this unit here with range combat, but also shoot and scoot back here to protect this area, and also be in an area where I can get supplies and search. So he moves his 1 foot movement to there, and then with my action, as I mentioned, I'm going to have him actually do a range combat action. So he uses his final supply, and it doesn't really matter if I shoot or scoot before or after in this case. So we'll just stay here, and he's going to fire at this in the area. He's got 3 for range combat. So he gets a shield and nothing, so those all amount to nothing, and a critical hit. And we get to re-roll that critical hit, which is another hit, so that ends up being 2 hits. So 2 of these tiles there, and starting to whittle down the threat on track 5 a little bit. So with that done, we move on to follow actions, and we have the National Guard first. Now, the number one thing I want to do with this follow action is try to repair the island-wide light and power station. So I'm actually going to have the National Guard pass on this follow action. There isn't a ton that I can do with Mac Reacher anyway, and what I don't want to do is draw an event card and not get to the Greenport Township. So they will not take a follow action, at which point the Greenport Township will, and Ralph Norton will do a repair action. So I draw 2 fate cards. So that's my first one is a 5, and my second one is a 5. So I draw 2 5s. So I go over here, and on a 5, remove damage markers equal to the admin rating of the unit. So he has an admin rating of 2, which allows me to remove 2 for the first 5 and the last one for the second 5. So with that, we have now powered up the island-wide power and light. What that allows me to do, which is really why I have focused on this, is now every single faction in the game is given 5 supplies. And what that means is that if I don't spend those, everybody is in pretty good shape to feed their units. So having done that follow action, we draw a card, we get no event card. Now I've got the PIRLSS Security Services. So with the PIRLSS Security Services, I would love, as we talked about, to use this special action to clean up the biohazard bag a bit, but I cannot use special actions as a follow action. So instead, I am going to have Kevin Blart engage in close combat with this Murder of Horrors stack. And this Murder of Horrors stack has 5, so that gives it a hit potential of 2, and he has a close combat rating of 3. So he gets 1 hit and a partial hit, so that's just 1 hit. Now, with a hit potential of 2, he actually takes 2 hits. So he's in a little bit of trouble there. And I remove 1 of the tiles from that stack. So at least their hit potential now is down to just 1, which will make it a little bit easier to deal with. And so with that follow action, as always, I draw a fate card and I have to draw an event card. Social distancing. The civilians are panicking and lashing out. Draw a fate number. All player units on that track number which are currently sharing an area with a civilians unit of any type take 1 hit. So I draw a fate card. So I'm looking at track 3. So I do not have any civilians here. I do not have any civilians here. So I got a little bit lucky. Basically, I don't have any areas with civilians and my standees, so I don't take any hits. Mind you, this area up here, it's a good chance that some of these civilians are going to get munched if I don't do something. So our last token is a fate token. So we're going to draw a fate card and we activate track 4. Or sorry, we spawn on track 4. So we're going to spawn into there, and now that gives us 8 horrors in that stack on track 4. And then we activate tracks 5 and 6. So on track 5, this is the furthest horrors unit down the space, but it isn't going to move because it starts in a space with a player unit. So, but I will place a combat marker there, just again to remind myself that I need to perform combat here. And then this unit, which has 6, so it's moving 2 spaces, it moves 1, and now it has to draw a fate card to determine whether it is going to go to John's hunting lodge or whether it is going to go to the Clementine State Penitentiary, where the Pancaldi Italian deli was apparently serving lunch to the prisoners. So it's a 4, so unfortunately that means that they take this side of the fork, which means that they eat the deli meat along with the employees of the deli. We add to their stack 1 because they killed a unit, so we add 1 for every unit that they eliminated. And we add another yellow cube to the biohazard bag, which is now 50% green and 50% other things, which is a pretty high number for turn 1. But with that, we go on to combat here. So we'll resolve this combat. So we got another close combat, which is going to actually add to the biohazard bag even more. So just this unit there are 3 objects in this unit, so it has a hit potential of 2. No, it has a hit potential of 1 because it is in a forest area, so 3 divided by 3 has a hit potential of 1. And Commander Stallion has a close combat rating of 2. So we go down here. I deeply love a shield here. But I'm going to get absolutely nothing. So, unfortunately, Commander Stallion, I'll just clone this, takes a hit. And we do absolutely no damage whatever to this Murder of Horrors stack. And that is the end of that activation, that turn activation. So now we move on to the sort of end phase. So we don't do the replenish location step because that's only done in night rounds. The mutations regeneration step, we don't have any horrors mutations on the board yet, so we can skip that. Now we draw 2 cubes from the biohazard bag. Excuse me, I'm going to make you seasick by going the wrong direction. So we draw a yellow and a green. That was actually pretty fortunate. So we add 1 for the yellow cube, none for the green cube, and then those go back in the bag. And then we refill the turn order bag. So all of our turn order tokens go back into the bag. And then we move on to the next round, round 2, where the players will each get 2 actions per activation instead of 1. And with that, we are through the first turn of the Plum Island Horror. So we're going to end the video here. Thanks for staying all the way to the end. Hopefully now you have a good sense of how Plum Island Horror plays in practice to go along with an understanding of the rules. If you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you could do all the standard things: subscribe, like, share, comment, and we'll be back later, hopefully with some content for either Plum Island Horror or some other games. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next video.